Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dick Deming. I'm Medical Director of MercyOne Cancer Center, and I'm the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series, brought to you in part from a grant from the Iowa Cancer Consortium. So welcome, everyone. And I got a good friend with me here in the studio audience, Sophia Ahmad.
Hi, Dr.
Sophia,
Deming.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's so good to see you.
It's great to have you here. We should tell our audience that you and I have a little bit of background, that Sophia is instrumental in helping us create the music as therapy program at the new MercyOne Richard Deming Cancer Center.
Yes.
And not only did she help create it, but she's also a wonderful musician. And Sophia grew up in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And then got her undergrad degree in performance in piano, and her graduate degree also in the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York.
That's right.
Performing piano. So what was like your senior, well, you probably don't get it, senior recital in college, or your equivalent to a senior recital in grad school? Like, what did you have to play? Like Rachmaninoff, or you probably didn't get to do variations of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
No, although my 2-year-old son loves those variations of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And he, in fact, has a tiny little violin that he tries to play it on. But unfortunately, we didn't get to do that. So I played, oh my gosh, this feels like eons ago, but it was a dream. I played 2 very beautiful Beethoven sonatas. So one of them is his Opus 110, which is his sort of later style. In that time period, he was going deaf, and so he was really exploring the capacities of the piano and the span and the range. So there's a lot where your hands are super far apart. He explored this musical technique called bebang, which is actually, it creates this gasping sound on the instrument, and it's accomplished through the piano's double escapement mechanism. So on the piano, a hammer releases and then it releases quickly again. But if you depress it fast enough, it won't sound again. And that creates this sound on the piano, which he really pioneered in this sonata. So that's that one. I played another Beethoven sonata, the Passionata, which is a very famous, exciting one, and some Bach and some Chopin, I believe, and some Schumann, and the whole 9 yards.
So when you're
Schoenberg.
doing like this senior recital, like a graduate program in performance, you do it with no sheet music, right?
You do it memorized. That's correct.
You have to memorize it all.
That's correct.
So you're not only playing all this, but you're doing it from memory.
That's correct. Now, so it's interesting because it's a very, very difficult thing to do, and you see concert instrumentalists and pianists doing this all the time, and yet it's almost easier to play memorized than with the music, because the music becomes a distraction when you're trying to hear a sound in your mind and then physically execute it in real time in space. And there are things that you want to do in a concert hall or in a performance space that are really, really important sometimes to not have the music there. So for example, if it's particularly reverberant, if it's very echoey, you may want to lay off the pedal, and you may have to leave some more time in between rests or moments of silence, right? So that the sound has a chance to clear. If it's particularly dry, you may be more exposed as an instrumentalist. Talk to pianists about how much they may not like that a little bit, right? And then you may add a little bit more pedal, but it's this constant feedback system of what you're hearing and then what you're playing, and then adjusting as needed.
Yeah, but it has to take many, many hours for your fingers to know where to go.
That's correct.
Without you actively, I mean, our brain is amazing. How can our brain actually get somebody to do a half-hour piece of your fingers just almost moving without you thinking?
I know. Well, you're the physician, so I count on you for explaining how that works, because I don't. But
by the end of our hour, we will have cracked that nut, I'm sure.
But what I will say is that the most effective and efficient memorizers, if that's even a word, know that the music does not begin here, it begins up here. And some may say it begins in your heart too, but you really have to, when you go to memorize, say, a Beethoven sonata, or a piece of music like that, you have to understand it at a 30,000-foot view. So you're looking at high-level formal structure. I mean, there's 4 movements of the piece. The first movement is typically in what's called Sonata Form. So it kind of follows a storyline pattern. Like a story, you have an exposition or an introduction, and then a development, and usually 2/3 of the way through it, something really, really
The witch
dramatic
appears,
happens.
or the
Yes, the
storm
witch or the
comes.
storm, and then you have to have time to resolve it. Well, music follows, typically Western music follows a similar pattern where you start in a home key. Everything seems to be going pretty well until a secondary key comes along, or secondary pattern, and then everything goes awry. They develop it, they go into different key areas. There's a lot of clashing. The audience is like this, and then eventually it resolves back to the home key. And then, so you're kind of looking at it that way. And then you get lower and lower into the more granular. And eventually, I mean, I feel, and I know a lot of other pianists in particular, because we have the most notes probably, but don't tell my husband who's a violinist.
I didn't realize
yeah.
it's just competition.
Oh,
I
yeah.
had more notes than you
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Like I had more lines
Oh,
in this
yeah,
play
for
than you
sure,
did.
for
Okay.
sure. That's what.
Yeah.
But
the poor cymbal guy.
the poor
he only
cymbal,
just
yeah,
once,
yeah, exactly. Well, it kind of gets back to why do you memorize in the first place? You memorize, I mean, the complexity of it is such that you do. It's sort of what I hear professional golfers do. I'm not a professional golfer, but you kind of get in the mindset of flow and in the moment, and you're really visualizing where the ball is going and the swing, and not thinking of the mechanics of it. It's the same thing with a good performance. You have to hear the sound you want to create in your mind, and then you've trained physically and from a technical perspective to be able to execute that in real time and adjust as you need to. And if you try to go into the technical part of it, like, oh, I have to turn my thumb under, or I have to do this, it actually hurts you. Yeah, and such.
So it's amazing how something that technically challenging and difficult, that those of us just listening can still appreciate what comes out without having to know what goes into it.
Yes. Well, and that's the magic of good music making too. There are certain things that musicians know that will be compelling to listeners to feel like they're included in the performance experience. For example, research has shown that a steady beat helps people feel more connected to music, and you'll get responses like, oh, I like that piece better than something that's uneven, right? And that's because, we have natural rhythms within our body and natural cycles within our bodies too. And we as humans can really feel that. And so I think, as I can speak for pianists, we think a lot about rhythm, of course, but we think a lot about pulse and how that can relate to the natural human pulse, or a pulse you feel in nature, or these sorts of things.
And as you sort of alluded to, a nice natural pulse is healthier than atrial fibrillation,
Right.
which coming through in music is like sporadic
Right.
and
Right.
dissonant and
Right.
yeah,
And
it's
even
not calming.
Right. And even, there's some really interesting what we call new music or new compositions, and particularly classical music, where it almost sounds as if it's just completely awry. But if you were really to put a beat to it, you could find a center of
Okay.
gravity, so to speak, in a
You
beat.
can
It's just
find a
very
beat to Philip Glass.
Exactly. It's just it could be very syncopated, or in his case, very repetitive, or there's a musical term called hemiola, and I like to explain it to music students as hemiola, because that's where the beat falls where you don't expect it to fall. Or, syncopation is another word for that,
Which
with a particular
syllable to accent.
Exactly, which syllable to accent.
So we're going to talk about the therapeutic effect that
Yes.
music can have. And we're going to distinguish in our talk the concept of music therapy and music as therapy.
Yes.
And I think most of us intuitively understand music as therapy. I mean, who doesn't use music to either, in 45 minutes, I'm going to be up in the spin room using music to enhance a mood, to use a beat that is being used kind of therapeutically, intentionally, to help create a mood, a rhythm, an impulse to exercise greater. And who hasn't put on calming music before bed to try to help create a mood of relaxation and calming? So I suspect from the very beginning so who do you music folks ascribe the creator of music?
Whoa, the creator of music. Oh my gosh. Well, that's a good question. I don't
So
know if
there's probably a Greek or Roman god that bears the title.
Yes. Well, we do know, I mean, in terms of music used as therapy, I mean, that was alluded to as early as the time of Aristotle, and probably, way before that. There was something in the Baroque era that any music student will study called the Doctrine of the Affections. And this doctrine said, and they really believed it and prescribed to it, particularly in art and in music, that either visual or audio sounds could create these really, really specific emotions, so to speak. So Bach, for example, was obviously a well-known composer in the Baroque era. He utilized the Doctrine of the Affections, and for example, there may be certain figurations in music that had a descending chromatic scale, for example, where it would move by half step down, and it was often thought to denote sorrow or sadness. You could have a leaping pattern that was meant to express joy. So even at that point, they were thinking about how music could be utilized to evoke certain emotions in people who were playing it, but then also people who were listening to it. That also tied into the sorts of tuning that they used. They had something called well-tempered tuning. So you may have heard of Bach's well-tempered clavier. It's a set of 48 pieces he composed for piano, in particular modes or in particular keys, because they tuned them differently to create different feelings or different emotions
that they thought would bring out emotions.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then you saw that.
Is anybody going to Broadway knows there's something. I mean, you use a song like, Les Miserables, I Dreamed a Dream, and there's something about, even if you didn't know the words in the stories, that somebody gets to sing that brings tears to your eyes. Just the I don't know if it's the key it's in, if it's the note it's in, or if it's minor or major, or playing with that almost makes you well up because it touches you somewhere.
There are certain musical intervals or patterns or keys or figurations that can be used to create what have typically been associated with certain emotions or feelings. And so that for sure is real. Going back to the keys, I mean, what was sort of established in the Baroque era continued through the classical era with Beethoven. So he in particular used certain keys. E flat major he used as a very heroic key. So he has this Emperor Concerto, which is on Sirius XM's classical channel, if anybody listens to that. My husband and I listened to their concerto countdown, and their number one concerto was Beethoven Emperor Concerto in E flat major. And so we actually were listening in different cars and called each other, and we're like, "Can you believe it?" But it's a very heroic key, like his Eroica.
Not quite the same as, how about them Yankees?
Yeah, it's a little different, but you have to follow what excites you, right? And that even continues now. I mean, we oftentimes associate the key of F major with a pastoral theme. So it has a B flat in it, which is flats are preferred for wind instruments. So you hear, you can think of flutes and pastoral scenes and whatnot. And so there are these sort of tropes in music that have followed us for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, that have helped people connect to sound and emotion and vice versa. What's particularly interesting too, in the late 1800s, so late 18th century, early 19th century, is that composers became more emboldened with how they talked about the powers of music and what they could do. So I kid you not, you asked about one of my some of my recitals. Well, at Eastman School of Music, I did a lecture recital on Schumann, a Romantic composer. He wrote a piece called Waldszenen, called Forest Scenes. And they really believed, and this was championed by poets and sort of taken up by musicians, that when words trailed off, it would actually turn into music. I mean, there are treatises and poems and books written about this. They really believed in the power of music to transform the human experience. I pulled this quote from Debussy that just came up on my social media feed this weekend that I thought was so interesting. And he says, so Debussy was a French impressionistic composer, but music, don't you know, is a dream from which the veils have been lifted. It's not even the expression of a feeling, it's the feeling itself. So these were the sorts of things that, composers really felt and believed as they created these pieces and wanted performers and listeners alike to really feel that.
Mm-hmm. And then over time, we know we participated in a project with the Civic Music Association and the Brooklyn Ryder String Quartet.
Yes.
Performing variations of a piece that was written with the idea of healing in mind.
Yes.
And talk a little bit more about that piece and the history of how that piece was either written or promoted to be healing, and what did it have the power to heal?
Sure.
Did it have the power to heal the blues? I mean, a depression? Did it have the power to heal syphilis?
Sure.
Did it have the power to heal tuberculosis?
Yes. So we were very fortunate to be approached by Civic Music Association that was collaborating with several individuals and organizations in the community. So MercyOne, Richard Deming Cancer Center, John Stoddard Cancer Center came together for this project, as well as musicians and cancer survivors to explore music and to explore the healing modes of music with, as Dr. Deming said, this professional, wonderful string quartet, the Brooklyn Ryder String Quartet. So that event actually opened with a really interesting panel discussion, which actually you could Google and rewatch that. It's really worth it. It's very, very compelling, in which we talked about the healing that can come from music. And I love the way, Dr. Deming, that you talk about it, where we think about what exactly it means to heal through music. And you say always, we're not killing cancer cells through music, but we're improving our quality of life. We're improving our well-being. We're lifting our mood. We're lifting our spirits, or we're exploring emotions, or we're exploring places that take us back to moments that are worth revisiting, or take us back to places that are maybe not worth experiencing again. They can, if you've ever had that experience where you've listened to a song and you've been brought back to a place in your life. I was in I was in a store and I heard a U2 song called Lemon that I listened to in college, and I felt like I was in college again, right? It can have those memory evoking qualities as well. So the Brooklyn Riders on that particular program were playing a Beethoven string quartet, and just bringing it back to Beethoven, who I'll just note happens to be my favorite composer. Apologies to any other people out there who may have other opinions. But he really, he's such an interesting person because he wasn't a perfect composer. If you look at his early works, some of them were really great. Like For Elise is probably a really good example of an early work that was great, but some of them weren't. I mean, he was figuring things out. And then when he discovered he was becoming deaf, he wrote a famous letter called the Heiligenstadt Testament, in which he sort of came to terms with this deafness. And he said, I need to really, really focus on not performing anymore, not teaching anymore, but really only on composition. And do you remember earlier when we were talking about how the music begins in your mind? Something I didn't really say is that, if you're really trying to memorize a piece, especially on the piano, you know that you've really memorized it if you can close your eyes and hear the music in your mind and almost imagine yourself actually executing the piece in real time. And then what's really remarkable is you can get to the point where you can hear yourself play it and adjust it. You can think, oh, I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it like this. And you can actually practice in your mind. There's not a document I found that really attests to this, but I have a feeling that that's the same mind muscle that Beethoven used as he was writing his later quartets, like the one that the Brooklyn Writers played.
And then as he's writing, as he's deaf, he's hearing in his mind as he puts notations on a piece of paper. He definitely knows music.
Yes.
Because he's not one of these who just picks up guitar and plays things without reading
Right,
music.
right.
And by the time you're deaf, you know what that sounds like
Right.
if you make a quarter note on this place in the grid.
Right. He's getting to the point where he can really hear the music in his mind. So also I should say in music, you say, you recognize this, the real magic of music, again, is to make it sound very effortless for the audience. And yet it's highly, highly structured and highly organized. And also, typically, classical music follows, I would say 80% to 90% of Western music follows in general what we call a 1-5-1 pattern. So remember I was talking about the home key and then moving far away to a place, an unknown sonic land, and then moving back to this home area. That's a big formal structure that most every classical piece of music uses. Most every jazz piece uses, definitely every single rock piece uses, which helps to provide a framework that you can hear things in your mind. So it wasn't so much as a guess for him, like, where do I go next? It's like he's like, okay, I've got to get back to this point. I can do this like 4 or 5 different ways. Which way am I going to do it? And he probably manipulated it in his mind.
Back to the Brooklyn Writer and the Beethoven piece. So there's some history with this piece that was either written intentionally for healing or after being heard was understood as being healing. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that piece got associated with healing?
I cannot remember the particulars of the quartet that they played, so I apologize. But what I can say is that in music, and actually this sort of ties into another collaboration we had with Civic Music, in composers' research and in musicologist research, there have been certain musical gestures that have been correlated with reduced stress. So perhaps reduced heart rate. For example, if the tempo or speed of a piece comes down, it has been correlated with a reduced heart rate or reduced stress or reduced anxiety. And so there may have been some elements of that could have been described as healing as well.
And then another piece that's associated with healing is the musical blessing.
Yes.
So earlier this year, we had the world premiere of a musical blessing done by the Bellin Quartet. And tell us a little bit more about the composer
Yes.
and the writing of that piece, and then some of the musical techniques
Yes.
that were used to bring out the healing effect of the music.
Absolutely, yeah. So this was such a special project that you and I worked on together, and we had engaged a composer named Nolan Gasser, who is the chief musicologist with Pandora Radio, and he came on our radar because he had done a similar commission for Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. And so through a very informal Google search, we came across him and reached out to him and said, hey, we are launching this new MercyOne Richard Deming Cancer Center in Des Moines. And, it's really a tribute to the vision that you have set for that cancer center, Dr. Deming, because if you're not familiar with it, the MercyOne Richard Deming Cancer Center has this really, really beautiful element of compassionate care, and in that has this integrative medicine program, of which the music as therapy program is a part of. And so we were helping him understand what we were trying to accomplish with this patient-centered, multidisciplinary approach to care, where the patient is surrounded by care in a comforting, compassionate environment. And how can we depict that in a way that honors this new addition that will help save thousands and thousands of lives in Iowa? And also, how can we use it in a way that our patients can participate with it in an ongoing way? So, Dr. Deming, you and I met with Nolan over the phone and talked a little bit about some of the things we hope to see in the piece. You had shared with him a book that was an inspiration to you called To Bless the Space Between Us by John O'Donohue. And that was the impetus for the title of the piece, A Musical Blessing. We had shared with him about the Music as Therapy program and how it was our hope to have a portion of the piece. We called it like the Hey Jude portion, right? I'm sure he appreciated that. But it was a part where we wanted people, non-musicians and musicians alike, to feel like they could participate in it. You don't have to have any musical background to do it. You don't even have to have an instrument. You just have to have a willing heart. And so this is a portion of the piece that is all in C major. If you have a piano or a mallet instrument, you cannot play a wrong note because it's all the white keys. And it's intended to be participatory, and we'll maybe get into this in a little bit. In music therapy, there are 4 sort of elements to music therapy, and one of them is actually participating in a piece. Another element is improvising, and so that sort of touched on both of those. So we had the preview world premiere for the donors of the Richard Deming Cancer Center in April, and then we had the public world premiere and invited our cancer patients there and their families at the Bell and Quartet inaugural concert this year in May at the Temple for Performing Arts, which is a really, really special moment.
Yes, as people, and one of the things that I didn't realize till I was in the room, sitting just 3 feet from these 4 musicians performing, and they're sitting in a square very close to each other, and there's 2 violins, a viola and a cello.
Yes.
And obviously the sound comes from vibration of strings, but when you're actually sitting within a couple feet of these 4 stringed instruments, you're not only hearing it, you're feeling the vibrations of the strings.
Yes.
And so the 4 are performing. There's not a conductor. The 4 are looking at each other, interacting with each other, a few nods and sort of ways of, how long you're going to pause, when you're going to. But the thing that I remember the most sitting that close was sensing, feeling within my body the actual vibration of the strings, in addition to the elements of the sound that was being created.
There's really nothing like a live performance. It feels different. You're engaging more senses, right? I mean, that additional sense of feeling, that almost like a touch. And you have the element of surprise. You can build off of the energy in the room. The audience is, in essence, an active participant in the piece too, because the musicians feel that. And, with a room full of people, the sound also changes and the feedback system changes for the quartet as well. I don't know if you recall, they were rehearsing prior and you and I were there, and they asked me to listen for balance. And I gave them my feedback, and at the same time reminded them that it's going to change when people are in the room too, because they sort of, people absorb the sound as well. The piece, you had asked a little bit about the piece and the form and sort of what it explores. So the piece is not necessarily what's called programmatic in music, meaning that every single element represents something. There were composers who really did that. There's a composer, Berlioz, who composed this famous Symphonie Fantastique that had this ID fix that was, perpetuated throughout the piece, and every single musical passage depicted something. It's not that formulaic. in general, it explores elements of a cancer patient's journey. It explores the joyfulness and peaks, and it explores sadness, and eventually it settles in a place of hope and perhaps acceptance. And so he does this formally by exploring what's known as a rondo form in music, which is basically a contrasting form. So you might think of like verse, chorus, a little something new, a little something else new, and then back to that pattern again. So like a B, A, B, A, C, D, C, A, B, A sort of pattern or something like that. But it's about 10 or 11 minutes long. If you actually go to the MercyOne Richard Deming Cancer Center website, which is at mercyone.org/RDCC. You can listen to a professional recording of it, and you can also read really, really interesting program notes that were written by the composer himself, intended for that purpose.
Right, and in speaking with the composer before he composed it, we talked about the cancer journey and the ups and downs that happens. I mean, everyone's journey is different, but it often starts with shock and surprise. Mm-hmm. You have cancer, and it assembles a team. It proceeds with hope and optimism, but there's usually some hiccups along the way and some bumps along the road, and some foreboding as one wonders, am I going to make it? Am I going to die? Then there's joy, there's acceptance, mm-hmm. and there's, this resolution that mm-hmm. comes. And I thought he did a wonderful job of, creating music that evokes those various mm-hmm. emotions, and more than just emotions, they're kind of like meanings and ideas, mm-hmm. Philosophical ideas as much as they are emotions.
Mm-hmm. I think I can hear portions of it in my mind as you're talking about it, and I think about the first violin in the quartet has these figurations that almost sound like questions, that, when you ask a question, typically your voice goes up, and the violin does that, and then it sort of half resolves, and then it goes up again and sort of half resolves. And I think about that too with, uncertainty perhaps mm-hmm. in the journey, or questioning, why is this happening now to me at this time? How is this going to feel? There's some really complex emotions and experiences that music can explore that, there's that famous quote that Hans Christian Andersen, when words fail, music speaks, right? And you can really sense that, I think, in this musical blessing piece.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Music as Therapy programming that's already happened and what's planned
yes.
to happen. So I know that you already had a gig with some ukulele players.
Yes.
So that was one of the first
yes.
Music as Therapy. So Sophia is a professional musician, but she's not a music therapist.
That's correct.
Which is someone who is trained in counseling, basically psychotherapy, utilizing music along with professional counseling skills. And one doesn't have to be a music therapist to participate in music as therapy. Mm-hmm. So before we talk about music therapy,
sure.
let's talk about music as therapy, and
sure.
maybe just start by one of the little programs you put together
yes.
for the Cancer Center.
Yeah.
As music as therapy.
Yes. So, and when Dr. Deming and Kylie Cooper, the director of integrative medicine, approached me and my organization about this, I wanted to really understand what we were trying to accomplish and what we were trying to do. And so we came up with a content document that helped understand what we're sort of rooting this in and what the programs would look like. And so at the heart, overarching the music as therapy programming at the Deming Cancer Center includes one-on-one music therapy counseling for patients at the Deming Cancer Center. It includes monthly programming, which we'll talk about in a moment here. And then it includes quarterly community-based programming in which we as a group go out into the community and experience music together. So what Dr. Deming was alluding to was a group ukulele class. It was our first monthly drop-in class. It was absolutely wonderful. As we're planning the music as therapy programming, we are including a music therapist to attend some of the classes and actually to plan some of the classes. And so, as Dr. Deming said, I'm not a music therapist, but I have enough music knowledge, and we're engaging music therapists to interact with these. So the first class, we had a woman named Natalie Steenson, who is a ukulele player and specializes in group ukulele instruction and is just a wonderful all-around educator. And she came with a rolling cart of ukuleles and brought them. We had several patients there, and we, myself included, got trained on how to play. This wasn't intended to be related necessarily to the cancer experience, but as a way to explore trying something new, as a way to maybe take the mind off of treatments, as a way to stretch the boundaries of what we can do. We had individuals there that are experiencing side effects from their treatment, perhaps fatigue or immobility in some places too. And so it was really inspiring to be able to see them in the moment try this, and for us to be able to adapt to enable them to still have an enjoyable experience. We all played classics such as Shoe Fly Shoe together, Baba Black Sheep, if you've heard of that's another good one. Really, some really good. So they accomplished a lot in just an hour.
Bubbles?
We didn't do Tiny Bubbles, unfortunately. But we had, and now I'm trying to remember we got to some really interesting, more complicated songs too. But as
So
I mentioned,
ukulele is 4 strings.
4 strings.
And does it have frets?
It does.
So you can,
yeah.
that helps you
Yes.
learn where to put your fingers.
Yeah. Well, it has,
Or-
it came with, and I'm not a ukulele expert, okay? But it has positions where you can, and she put stickers on there
Oh,
where you could,
great, yeah.
figure out what to do.
Where-
Yeah. Even I was like thinking through it. It's like, okay, I got to concentrate now. But it was really, really nice. And in fact, the feedback we got after the class was just that people felt that they could take their mind off of treatment and think about something else just for
When you talk
that
about
hour.
flow, I mean, anything where you just requires your attention, takes your mind off of regrets of yesterday and worries about tomorrow. And the more that we're here today, and that can be done by creating art, creating music, but there's the act of creating something that requires your attention is therapeutic.
Yes.
But then there is this group thing,
Yes.
which is, there's theories that even marching together in time, doing something together as a group in time has
Yes.
therapeutic benefit.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's the auditory component of the music that you're creating.
Yes, for sure. And it's just remarkable to be able to engage in that way too. I mean, you're right that there is something that's really special about that group experience. And in fact, somebody asked if we were going to be doing that every month, to which I thought, wow, well, that's a good vote of confidence. But I don't know that we can, but we'll for sure do those more often as well.
What is the next drop-in?
The next drop-in is coming up a week from Monday. So today's Wednesday, right?
Right.
Today's Wednesday. Okay, so this coming Monday
Is the 11th.
It's the 11th and
Okay,
July
July
11th,
11th.
and that's the next drop-in. And we have for this drop-in a certified music therapist who's coming in. Her name. Oh, go ahead.
No, what time on
it is-
Monday,
so-
July 11th?
So all of these programs, the monthly drop-ins, are the second Monday of the month at 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the MercyOne West Des Moines Medical Center. in the garden room downstairs. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's 12485 University Avenue, Clive.
Yep,
For
right
those-
here in
so
Clive.
It's just the Mercy Cancer Center office in Clive.
Yep.
And that's where the drop-in music will
Yep.
be.
And-
And people can drop in. You don't have to sign up ahead of time.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. So that's
No, don't
next
apologize.
Monday. And,
Yep.
and what are we going to do?
Yeah, so we are going to be led in a session with a music therapist from West Music. Her name is Maddie, and she is going to be playing several pieces of music and several songs. And we're going to be doing
On
some.
what sort of an instrument?
That I believe she's actually playing it. She might be playing it live or singing it live, and she'll have percussion instruments,
Okay.
but she may be playing it pre-recorded. But we're going to do some lyric exploration
Oh, okay.
and listen to the lyrics of the song, and then participants will create their own personal mantra about healing or an experience, and then we'll put those personal mantras together and create a song. And then we'll actually play the song together with some percussion instruments. So we're going to do that all in an hour.
Yeah.
So
So
that,
yeah, the focus, as you pointed out, the music itself, but the lyrics. I mean, some songs we remember because of the lyrics.
that's right.
I've
That's
looked
right.
at life from both sides now.
That's right.
Climb
Yes.
every mountain.
Yes,
I mean,
for
where,
sure.
where the lyrics kind of bring you in and make you think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's some real, I think, powerful things that can happen with that. So we're excited about that. Now, in August, we're in for a real treat because, and the August one is the only one that will be actually held in the county conference room, which is just, 50 feet away maybe from the garden room in the same location at the West Des Moines Medical Center for the August meeting. And we will be joined by Nolan Gasser, who is the composer of A Musical Blessing. He'll be joining us via Zoom from California and walking us through the Musical Blessing piece and talking about it. We'll listen to the piece, and then we will have a music therapist there on site to walk us through the portion of the piece that we can actually participate in. So we'll have instruments there, we'll participate in that and explore that piece in that way, which will be really exciting.
Great, great. And I just realized I want to correct something. I misunderstood where the event's going to be on 7 Live. It's not the Mercy Cancer Center, Clive. It's the Mercy Hospital.
Yes.
So so the address I gave is not correct. So it's at the Mercy Hospital that has a beautiful room with waterfall and a piano.
Yes.
Yes. So she
Yes.
doesn't have to bring a keyboard.
Yeah.
Yes, the beautiful piano. So that's at the Mercy Hospital, which is technically in West Des Moines, just on the south side of the university.
Yes.
And
Yes.
59th and in West Des Moines.
And we thought we would try that venue because for a few reasons. When you come in, as Dr. Deming said, you actually do walk by this beautiful grand waterfall that visually is very, very peaceful, but you also have the sound quality of the water trickling down and hitting the rocks and splashing the water that we felt sets a really nice tone for this. And then you have the grand piano there in the foyer, and then we're sort of set in a private area as well, which we just found was really nice. And we actually heard from one of the participants that she appreciated for that day coming to a place that was maybe not where she was receiving treatment. So that was interesting feedback.
Great parking, easy parking, and
Very
accommodate.
easy access. If you do come, you will need to bring a photo ID, and we'll wear masks throughout, and we would have masks on site there. And if you, as Dr. Deming said, you can drop in. However, if you want to register in advance, it just helps our presenters plan a little bit more. So you would just want to email Brittany, BRITTANY, Brittany at mobilemusiclessons.com. So mobile as in a mobile phone, MOBILE musiclessons.com, and she'll get you registered and signed up.
So, and Mobile Music is Sophia's company, and invite you to tell us more about that company. And Sophia also is Vice President of Philanthropy at WesleyLife.
Yes, yes.
So, and that's a new position for her.
Yes.
So she's been involved with fundraising for many years, and many music organizations need to do fundraising
Yes.
in order to...
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Well, it feels, and thank you for those kind words, Dr. Deming. I mean, it feels very full circle to do this. So I was full-time at MercyOne just up until Friday and just treasured my time there so much. Moving to WesleyLife and this they're creating a new foundation that I have the privilege of leading, seemed like a natural progression into, a health and wellness space from MercyOne. And of course, with my music background, to be able to be a part of this is such a privilege, and sort of bringing the two together to really see your vision through this music as therapy program and how it will help cancer patients and really help unite our community, I think, through music.
There's been a lot of research over the centuries on music as therapy, and I recently was reading some studies that are being funded by the National Institutes of Health, and they're actually have as one of their, I guess you would call her a champion, a musician, Renee Fleming, who is an opera singer, but has long recognized this therapeutic effect that music can have. So they're actually looking at clinical trials using music to help with pain management, to help with certain neurologic disorders, including dementia. I mean, there's lots of anecdotal information of individuals who aren't very communicative because of dementia, but then you play a particular song, and the next thing you know, they haven't spoken for weeks, but they might start singing along to the song. And also looking at, in cancer care, the use of music, not necessarily the theory that a certain note will kill a cancer cell, but the use of music to reduce stress, and reduction of stress can actually have effects on how the body's immune system may play a better role in regulating cancer.
Interesting.
So it's not beyond the possibility that music could have a result in killing cancer cells through stress reduction, enhancement of the immune system, and then the immune system's effect on cancer. But even if it doesn't end up killing a cancer cell, taking care of patients with cancer is about overall quality of life.
Right.
And how can music help with stress reduction, pain management, relaxation, all of those elements of healing that have a positive effect on the way we feel.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think also, it's important to mention too, you hear sometimes about the positive benefits of playing an instrument, right? That it may help improve connections between the hemispheres of the brain and help improve executive functions and whatnot. Some of the things that we're talking about here with, reduction in stress and whatnot, the studies, at least that I have seen, are not necessarily by playing an instrument. Like, you can play an instrument as part of music therapy, right? We talk about that with the recreation aspect of music therapy, but there's also the receptive aspect of music therapy, which is just listening and experiencing the music. And these healing elements have been correlated or associated with even that receptive portion, which is really fantastic as well.
Yes, reducing blood pressure, even studies looking at blood tests of immune function or the stress hormones, and how we can change physiologically based on blood tests and measurements of our physiology by listening to music.
It's just remarkable. It's remarkable.
Let's talk a little bit about music therapy because,
Sure.
as you mentioned, you're not a music therapist, you're a musician, and we can gain a lot of healing from just participating. But talk a bit about the profession of a music therapist.
Yes.
And how that's different from music as therapy.
Sure. So I'll just say this too, in the Des Moines, Central Iowa area, and in Iowa, we are very fortunate to have certified music therapists here. We, through our program, have engaged West Music that has a nice roster of music therapists who have some flexibility that can come and again do one-on-one therapy sessions with our cancer patients at the cancer center, who can participate and lead these classes, and who we actually can engage to have on site when a professional musician who may not be a music therapist is leading a class that may conjure up emotions that may require a music therapist to be there to help counsel an individual. And so a music therapist, as you alluded to earlier, goes through a set of trainings and certifications to become a certified music therapist. And so they oftentimes have an appreciation for music. They oftentimes have had professional music training, and then they have a desire to serve others or to give back or to work in a health and wellness area or field, and they go through programs and certifications to become a music therapist. So there are several of these programs throughout the country, and we're fortunate to have several of them here in Iowa who have gone through that training in particular. And so that interaction between our musicians, myself and Brittany, our mobile music lessons managing director, as the administrators of this, and the musical therapist, that's very, very important so that the patient and the participant has a very well-rounded experience when they come in, and it feels effortless for them, and it feels like they've gained something or have had a positive experience afterwards.
Okay. So we're going to bring it to a close, and what we're going to do is we're each going to share some music. We're not necessarily performing. We'll just say what it is.
Okay.
So what would you want to get pumped up? You just something that will get you feeling energetic and happy. What's on your playlist?
Oh gosh. Well, and I do not just listen to classical music. I'll just say that. So I listen to a huge array of music, but I really like Kygo, if you've ever heard of him. He's a Norwegian DJ, and I would recommend a lot of his music for that.
Okay.
I believe he's Norwegian, but yeah. And producer. He's actually classically trained though.
Okay.
So, yeah. How about you?
So you can't go wrong with Tina Turner. I would say.
I totally agree.
Yeah, Tina Turner.
Yeah. Do you remember?
You're the best. You're simply the best.
Yes, that's
You're
right.
better than all the rest.
Yeah.
You're better than
Yes.
anyone. Wait, sorry.
We had asked Nolan to consider incorporating some Tina Turner
Okay.
elements in a musical blessing. Unfortunately, we did not see those in the piece, which, who knows, maybe in another iteration, but.
Yeah. So that gets me going. And so you can listen to my entire playlist by coming and joining me for spin class.
I would love that.
Okay,
I would love that.
We'll do that.
Could I ask you about a piece?
Sure.
Is there a piece of music that brings a tear to your eye when you hear it or moves you?
Sure. I would say one that is Bring Him Home from Les Miserables. And a part of it is the lyrics, and part of it is the story, and then part of it is a setting where I heard it at a celebration of life of a young man who had died. And the song is the young man is wounded, and he basically is hoping and praying that he is not dead, and that he will bring him home safely, and that he would give his life to make that happen. So it's in the context of the show, where you know the characters, but even in just the song itself is just
an amazing song.
Yes,
So
it really is.
You can't listen to that song.
No.
I can't listen to that
No.
song without
Yeah.
tears. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, thank you for sharing that. It's the last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony when the chorus finally sings with full volume, and there's sort of a descending bass line right before it.
Is that the Ode to Joy?
Yes,
part?
the famous Ode to Joy movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And if you haven't had the opportunity to hear it in person live, I highly, highly recommend going. The Des Moines Symphony plays it every few years live, and it's just the most tremendous thing you could maybe experience in life, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening at the Cancer Education Series. If you know someone that you think might enjoy listening to this, it will appear tomorrow on demand at the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel and at the Mercy Cancer Center website, where you can watch it over and over again. And I hope you'll come and join us again next week. Thanks for joining us again. Thank you, Sophia.
It's my pleasure. Thanks
Thanks,
for having me.
everybody. Good night.